Bonjour à tous. Hello everybody. C'est un plaisir pour moi et un honneur de vous accompagner dans ce point d'orgue de notre Paris Real Estate Week, ici pour ce forum de la ville, un événement unique dans un contexte particulier.
To host a unique event in a very special environment. Many thanks to all of you for being here with us at La Scène Musicale or remotely, wherever you are in the world. In any case, this is a very powerful signal sent by the MIPIM teams when they decided to continue this event in a hybrid format. Of course, the sector of events is well deserved to receive this type of event, and then of course, as you have done since the start of this week, it really feels good to be together.
Online, remotely, a very unique event, as I said in French, to discuss, to share, to address all our challenges in this changing and uncertain period. Le décryptage, je vous le disais, l'analyse de grands témoins, d'experts et de nombreuses contributions autour de cette thématique qui est Embracing the Change. Je voudrais que vous remerciez toutes les équipes du MIPIM pour cette prouesse qui est à la fois technique,
so I'd like to thank all the teams at MIPIM for this prowess, and its director, Ronan Vaspar. A very warm welcome to him.
Ronan qui est avec nous. Thanks for joining us. The floor is yours, Ronan. Thanks.
Thank you. Bonjour à tous. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, dear members of the MIPIM community. So here we are at the MIPIM Urban Forum, which is part of the Paris Real Estate Week. Forgive me if I repeat this word. Paris, this great city, real estate, this great industry, and week, this opportunity after so many months to come together to start charting a way forward in a world that has changed so much. The challenges that we face today are not national, they are international. So we are honored and grateful that we have with us political leaders from France, Italy, Belgium, and Russia. Thank you for being with us today. Many of you are acquainted with MIPIM. It's a very large international event that takes place in Cannes every year in March. In 2020, this has not been possible. This has been disappointing for you, our clients, and disappointing for our partners in Cannes, of course. Many people have lost their businesses. Worse, people have lost members of their families. So while we are happy to come together, we also remember the human cost that people have paid over the past few months. The pandemic has changed the world. It has changed the cities in which we live. We'll have to think long and hard about how they will develop, not just to be sustainable, but also to be safe. We hope to contribute to this long and difficult debate today and in the months and years to come. Our town and cities are entering a new era, entering it in overdrive. The pandemic is changing the urban environment radically. Our working habits are changing. Even our lifestyle projects are being altered. We are being challenged over population density, the use of offices, mobility, how we design residential real estate or interact with the environment. These are questions that will not wait until tomorrow. They need to be dealt with today. So I want to thank everyone here, and particularly the partners and sponsors of the Paris Real Estate Week MIPIM. It's often said that every challenge presents an opportunity. The Paris Real Estate Week is a case in point. While we are attending the event today, I'm happy to tell you that people who couldn't come due to quarantine will be able to access today's content via live streaming. On top of that, speakers who couldn't travel but who were keen to participate will be speaking from their homes and offices. That's the first time that we have done this at MIPIM. So I would like to thank you all for being with us, political leaders, real estate stakeholders, innovators, but also students, the future talent of the real estate industry, and also more than 100 journalists.
Thank you, Ronan. There's something important to notice and to mention now. You and your teams, to welcome a very special guest speaker to open this session and this day.
Yes, Frederic. MIPIM's commitment to you and to your colleagues at home is to bring you outstanding forward thinkers. Today we have such a person, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. He served as the 23rd President of the French Republic from 2007 to 2012. President Sarkozy guided France through the unique challenges of the 28 economic crises. He has shown time and again his commitment to a vision of the future, a future which is increasingly uncertain. In English, there is an expression that I think is particularly appropriate for President Sarkozy. He tells it how it is. No sugar, no walking around the subject, get to the point. So I'm sure we'll experience this today. Donc, mesdames et messieurs, c'est un immense honneur pour moi et pour l'ensemble de la communauté du MIPIM d'accueillir le président Nicolas Sarkozy.
Please welcome on stage President Nicolas Sarkozy. Merci, mesdames, messieurs. Voilà, président Nicolas Sarkozy, qui nous rejoint, qui va être avec nous pendant 1 heure. Il s'installe. Voilà, peut-être une photo, voilà. Merci, Président, d'être avec nous. Et on va demander à François Langlais.
We're going to ask the famous French journalist François Langlais, specialist of the economy, to come up on stage with us. François.
Je vais vous donner mon micro, François, voilà.
Merci. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Nous sommes ici.
Greetings to all. We're gathered here today to listen to President Sarkozy. Making cities more humane is the topic of today as urbanization is growing. There has been a very powerful movement of metropolization, concentration of capital, of human resources within cities. How far and how big can our cities grow? The pandemic and the fear of contagion, are they not something that are going to reverse, to buck the trend and make urban growth less powerful? Well, your first questioning encompasses at least 18 different questions. There are a number of global phenomena that are wholly unavoidable. The first one is the mutation. The global axis is now west-east. That no one can deny. Perhaps tomorrow the line will run from Africa, but today the axis of the world is tending towards the east rather than the west. And the metropolization of countries, the urbanization, is undeniably an important phenomenon. And nothing and no one can change that. Better still, if you look at Africa today, a continent of 1.25 billion inhabitants that will have 2.5 billion very soon. Africa today is 50 very large cities, more than 50 nations. Because these metropolitan areas ignore ethnic divisions. And today, Dakar, Lagos, all of these huge cities are phenomena with which, to which we need to get used to. And further still, there will be no economic development in a nation if that nation does not have one or several metropolitan areas to drive the nation's economic train, so to speak. And final point, all of this COVID affair has nothing to do with that. COVID has no influence on phenomena that are that important. Life is much more important than circumstances. And life after COVID will look very much like life before it. And saying that it won't be, to place humankind on a guilt trip, means you do not understand what life on Earth is. Every time there's a crisis, everyone says nothing will ever be the same again, but when it ends, everything is, because life is more important than circumstances. So we're not going to ask you what an ideal city would be, but you're familiar with the world. Which are the cities which you think could become role models? Well, that's François Langlet's intelligence. He doesn't ask me what the ideal city would be, because of course there is no such thing. This desire to create standards for happiness and ideal is quite the opposite of life itself. The ideal city changes from one continent, from one country, from one region to another. You must love cities, and you must love the differences between them. There is no one-size-fits-all. So if I were to make an effort to focus my thought, I would say there is something that absolutely must be avoided, that is trying to choose between identity and modernity. A city must be both loyal to its past and open to its future. The ideal city must live. Life itself emerged on Earth 4.5 billion years ago in multiple forms, and it's the multiplicity and difference and diversity that creates the quality of life and happiness of being alive. And I'm highly skeptical of the word equality, because I will always believe the strength of difference is greater than the egalitarian lie, which is a desire to flatten out things. True equality is letting differences express themselves. It's completely absurd to try to treat everyone in the same manner. I know that it's an old French reflex, but equality itself does not exist. Look at healthcare, for instance. There is no right to health. Everyone's health heritage is different. It depends on the biological lottery, of course. You are entitled to health care, of course, but where is equality? You must love cities, as I was saying. But you must love all of the differences within a city, because a wonderful city cannot look like another wonderful city. It needs to adapt to its own territory, its history, its culture, its demographics. And that is what makes it beautiful and vibrant. There is not a single model. What cities do you enjoy visiting apart from ours? If I were to think about one of the cities that amazed me the most with its ability to change, I would say Moscow. I visit Moscow 2-3 times a year and have done so for a number of years. And for those of you who are familiar with Russia and who visited Moscow, I am impressed by the manner in which Moscow has succeeded in retaining its historical heritage and become one of the most modern cities in the European continent. That is outstanding, and I'm not just talking about the new metro. They were a little bit quicker than we were. So I'm not making a judgment here, it's just out of personal taste, but on the Persian Gulf, by which I mean what's on the other side of Iran, the cities that they have created are absolutely flabbergasted. Look at Doha, Abu Dhabi, where at the moment they have 4 museum projects underway. 4. The Louvre Abu Dhabi is a huge success. Dubai. Imagine, picture this, 3 generations ago, their grandfathers lived in the desert under a tent. And today, architecture is thriving,
qui ont même démodé Hong Kong.
and they've even made Hong Kong look outdated. It's most impressive.
Après, quand vous allez à Lagos,
But then when you visit places like
22
Lagos,
millions d'habitants,
22 million
10 fois
people live
Paris.
there, 10 times Paris,
10 fois Paris.
10 times more than
Regardez
Paris.
Mexico, là,
If
qui
you look at
tremble
Mexico City,
sur la menace de tremblement de terre.
which is always
Vous savez,
threatened by earthquakes,
l'une des plus grandes villes.
one
au
of
monde.
the largest cities in the
Et
world,
Pékin, ils sont aujourd'hui
and
au
Beijing,
7e périphérique.
they have now built a 7th ring road.
Je sais bien que Prévert disait
So I know that
Paris est
French
grande
poet
sa petitesse.
Prévert used to
Mais
say
enfin,
Paris is great
c'est ça,
because
les
it
villes
is
de
small, but that
Et
is what
au
the
fond,
cities of tomorrow look
j'aime
like.
moi la ville qui bouge.
And what I like are
J'aime la
cities
ville
that
qui
are
ose.
in motion, cities
la
that
ville qui
are
réalise les
daring,
infrastructures.
cities that
J'aime la
make
ville où il y a
infrastructures,
des gestes architecturaux.
cities
J'aime
where
la ville où on
architecture
n'est pas
thrives,
paralysé
where
par
cities where
la
you're not
réglementation,
paralyzed by
les règles,
regulation,
le nivellement.
rules,
On préfère faire un petit cube
where
affreux
you
et
prefer to
légal
make an
que faire un
ugly,
geste architectural
legal,
considérable.
an
Parce que
ugly
si
cube
demain,
because it's
quelqu'un
legal
avait l'idée de
rather
faire la
than
Tour Eiffel, il y aurait
something
l'association qui défend
more
les crapauds
vibrant.
à dos
And
orange et point
if
bleu, qui
they
s'y
were to
opposerait
build the Eiffel
au nom
Tower,
de la
the
survie de l'espèce.
charity that defends
Je pense qu'une
blue-spotted
ville,
frogs
ça y est,
would
je
say,
le
no,
dis,
you can't.
une ville,
I
ça doit
think
vivre.
a city must
Une ville,
live,
ça
must be
vive
alive,
par
and
la
it's
qualité
only
des
alive
gestes
through the
architecturaux
quality of the architecture you allow there.
Vous évoquiez implicitement la
Mr. President,
réglementation, implicitement
you have just talked about
les dernières
regulation.
élections municipales en France, justement, ont porté au pouvoir
The
pour la
latest
première
municipal
fois
elections in France
des maires écologistes
have
dans des
voted
villes
in
très significatives.
a large number
C'est là où on voit qu'on va bien.
of green mayors.
Est-ce que vous y voyez
What do you see there?
signe.
It means huge progress, doesn't it? What cities of the future do you think that can prepare?
Je suis ici dans le département des Hauts-de-Seine que j'ai
Look,
eu la
I am
chance
here
de
in the
présider. J'ai le titre
region of the
de
Hauts-de-Seine.
et au cœur du Grand Paris,
I
que
was
j'ai tellement
president
voulu,
of this
que
region
j'ai
in the
côtoyé.
heart of the Greater
Il n'y avait
Paris.
rien ici sur cette île.
There was nothing
Rien.
here on this island, nothing.
Absolument rien.
Absolutely nothing
Et
at
on
all.
a eu l'idée de porter ça.
And
C'est ça la vie.
there was an idea. We wanted to do things.
Bon,
That
vous savez-
is what I mean by a city in motion.
J'aime le cyclisme.
You know, I
J'aime
like
le Tour de France.
cycling, I like
C'est
the
un
Tour de
spectacle
France.
gratuit,
It's
avec des gens
free
admirables qui font un
to
sport
watch.
admirable.
admirable people, an admirable
Eh bien,
sport.
jamais j'aurais imaginé
I would never have
qu'on
imagined
attaquerait ces gens-là
that these people would be
On les
under attack,
mépriserait.
that they would be despised,
en les traitant de
that they would be treated
pollueurs et de...
of, they would be called polluters and machos.
C'est ça la régression.
That is
Moi,
regression.
quand j'étais enfant,
When I was a kid,
j'allais avec ma mère, j'attendais ce jour.
I used to go with my mother. I used to wait for the whole year, and we went out to shop to buy our Christmas tree. That was hugely important for me. The symbol, the culture,
le respect d'une tradition,
the respect
la
for a
famille
tradition,
autour de ça.
family values.
J'avais pas le sentiment d'être un criminel qui faisait
I
du
didn't
mal à
feel I was a
l'humanité.
criminal harming humankind,
Mais il faut s'adapter, mon vieux.
but you know, you need to adapt to the
Ça vous
times.
paraît être le cycle
Ah,
de
ça me
poids
fait du bien de plus être dans la politique. Hein, parce que
Ah, it
franchement,
feels good not to be a politician,
ça,
I can
si
say.
ça, c'est de la politique,
That is pure politics,
c'est le contraire de ce à quoi
but it's
j'ai
quite the
toujours
opposite
cru. Un
of what
pays,
I have
une
always
ville,
believed in. A country, a
c'est
city,
une histoire.
is a
Ça
long
vient pas de nulle
history.
part. On s'inscrit dans une culture.
It's part of a
été
culture.
baigné par des mythes, des symboles, des
You've been
croyances.
bathed by myths, symbols,
livres,
beliefs,
des musiques,
books,
des films.
music, film.
Qu'est-ce que c'est que ça?
What are we
Qu'est-ce que
talking
c'est?
about?
C'est la négation de ce que nous sommes.
It's
nous,
the total
profondément.
denial of
Qu'est-ce que ça dit sur la
our
société
deeper
française?
nature.
Mais c'est
What do you think that says about French society?
terrible.
I think it
Comment voulez-vous
expresses a kind of
qu'on aille vers
vacuum.
l'avenir
How do you
si
think
à
we
ce
can move
point-là, on
towards the
renie nos
future
racines?
if we
Comment voulez-vous
renege on our
qu'on construise quelque chose
roots?
de
How can
fort,
we build
de
something
moderne,
strong
de
and
nouveau,
modern and new
avec un contenu,
with
si à ce
true
point-là,
content
on tourne le dos à toute forme
if
de
we
pensée,
turn our back
d'originalité
on
et d'histoire de notre
originality,
pays?
on the originality and
Mais les
history of our
crèches, je les
country?
excitais. Maintenant,
So,
c'est le sapin de Noël.
There were the nativity scenes that made them mad. Now it's the Christmas trees. Where will they stop? So, of course, environmental concerns
Je le comprends,
are
mais
crucial.
le sont
I
souvent,
very much understand.
y
And
compris
I won't take any lessons from
nos
anyone.
propres amis
I chose the Grenelle de l'Environnement should be organized, the Copenhagen Accord. But it can't be a refusal of any form of progress. It cannot be this kind of single thought where everyone can just want to have a detached house in a peri-urban area. It's not something absurd as being for or against skyscrapers or against 5G mobile networks. Yeah, against all that. They say, are you for or against skyscrapers, high-rise buildings? I say, I'm against ugly ones and I'm for beautiful ones. I may not be very smart, but I know what I'm saying when I say that. And then people say, densification of cities, but François Langlais, densification. When you're in Manhattan, do you say Manhattan's too densely urbanized? You say, no, it's beautiful. Defense. La Défense, rather. I had to walk through Nanterre when La Défense didn't exist. Was it better? Really? Along the Seine River. I think it would be great if there could be bridges with homes on them, like they were in the Middle Ages. You don't need to see the Rialto Bridge to know that that was the case. You mustn't look at the future in the hatred of everything that makes sense, anything that's a little bit powerful. Of course, everyone can't just live in their little cube. When Pompidou decided to create the Pompidou Center, so of course, I mean, you can like it or not like it, but they are powerful statements. When Mitterrand wanted to build Pay's pyramid, it was highly controversial, which is a healthy thing. But these are concepts built that can't be built on void. It wasn't really your question, but it definitely was my answer.
Monsieur Sarkozy, la France a été marquée récemment, vraiment.
Mr. Sarkozy, France
was very much marked. There were a few.
C'est la fracture territoriale entre les villes et le monde rural. Est-ce que cette explication vous paraît convaincante?
Non. La fracture territoriale, c'est une réalité.
No. Territorial divide is a reality, and I think we have to do whatever we can to reduce it. I think that the metropolization is unavoidable. You know, the crisis, and again, I consider myself to be an outsider of the political debate, but I disagree with the idea that this is a social crisis. This is a crisis which has to do with the labor world. Look at what happened during the COVID-19 crisis. We've had different initiatives, partial unemployment, and the government accepted to pay the salaries of all those who were under lockdown, those who could not work. I think France is the only country that did it to this extent, right? The country accepted to nationalize salaries for 3 months. And I'm not criticizing, because I, as a matter of fact, agree with this. Studies are free in France, and our healthcare system is unparalleled. Health itself is free. And now we have a social crisis. What do we want? Do we want more benefits? As if we didn't already have enough. This is not where the crisis is. We have a crisis with those who work hard all day long, and yet who can't pay their bills at the end of the month. The crisis comes from people who work hard, who cannot work more, and who, at the end of the month, have nothing left. This is a concern, and this should be a concern. And this is what I said back in 2007. And once again, we have to value and recognize work, hard work. During 3 months, we were forced to work either less or differently. And I think it is perfectly acceptable to see how we can make up for this time which was lost. The countries that will win the 21st century battle are the countries where labor will be properly rewarded and encouraged. The countries that are challenged are the countries where people don't work enough. I have a question. Thank you very much for applauding. This is very kind of you. But if you're happy at the end, it's okay to tell me at the end. You don't feel like you have to applaud. Internationally speaking, Mr. President, we have the multilateral system, which seems to be falling apart or disarticulating. Climate change, demographic sprawl. You've been the initiator of the response to the 2008 crisis. Are you concerned about this disarticulation? And if yes, how shall it be fixed? Well, let's look at things from a very simple vantage point. Which international organizations have not been impacted by the crisis? I think there's only one. Is it Europe? No, I think it's central banks. I beg your pardon, Mr. Langlais. We've had lockdowns at different periods, and the rules that applied were not the same. If that is Europe, well, I don't think that's the way Europe should operate. Central banks, however, did their job. They played a central role, and nobody is challenging what they did. WHO was literally pulverized. It's almost ridiculous. The International Monetary Fund. Some people seem to even have forgotten their name. The International Monetary Fund is supposed to play an important role in the global economy. Have you heard one single word from the International Monetary Fund during the crisis? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It doesn't make me regret Dominic Strauss-Kahn, but I think they could have done a little better. Who knows who is chairing the IMF these days? When the US were nowhere to be found, and the G20, in spite of the goodwill of a number of countries, I understand that Skype meetings are difficult, but the fact is that they made no concrete decisions either. The bottom line is we're in 2020, we've entered the 21st century, and we have the international organizations are those we had in the 20th century. We need to build a new system which will allow multilateralism to function. Take the United Nations and the Security Council. The members were chosen when the world had a little under 2 billion inhabitants. Today there are nearly 7 billion inhabitants. So is it normal to have the same number of countries that are members? No, it's not. There's not a single African country. India, which is the highest populated country, is not represented. There is not a single Latin American country. It makes no sense. There is not a single Arabic country which is a permanent member. This makes no sense. Europe, well, if you ask me, I'll tell you what I think. But I think we have to completely revisit the world's governance. Completely. It needs to be completely revisited to meet the requirements of our challenge. We have institutions that are a century old, for some, that were created in the past century, and we're in the new century. I hear what you're saying, Mr. President, about the lockdown and how people responded to COVID-19. There is something quite spectacular, however. It's the new the economic support programs, Mrs. Merkel, the central banks. When we look back and consider what happened in 2008 and then 2009 and during the Euro crisis, the response this time came much faster, right? Well, we can speak again about what happened back in 2008, 2009, and even 2010. I'm perfectly happy to discuss this. However, I cannot accept the fact that the second economy of Europe, that's the UK, leave Europe without this being a scandal. There are business leaders in this room. Imagine that all of a sudden your company's main subsidiary decides to leave. You would fight to keep it. It's a disaster for the Brits. It's a disaster for us. Europe cannot operate for the next 70 years the same way it operated during the past 70 years. It is not possible. We're 27 without the Brits, and it's a disaster. The fact they're leaving, that is a disaster. In the future, we're probably going to be 32 or 36. I don't see how we can tell the Balkan countries who are not members to stay out. We have to completely revisit Europe, and we need to consider that Europe in the future means there are several forms of Europe. There's the Euro Europe, there is the Union of Europe, we need the Schengen Europe, which is to be led by a government comprised of the ministers of interior, and they need to report to Frontex, because the immigration and border control policies have to be managed by an institution which itself is political to be fully legitimate. And this has to be supervised by France and Germany. I'm still wondering when we're going to see the money from the support programs. Procedures are extremely long, and the notion that all countries have the same rights or the same duties is inaccurate. When crises come, big countries have more responsibility than small countries. People don't turn to Luxembourg, Malta. People talk to Germany and France, right? And I very much support Mr. Macron's and Mrs. Merkel's initiatives. I think we need to revisit Europe. Once again, the European project. Being a European these days means supporting movement and not being in favor of immobilism. I will just wrap up by saying that the Brexit is a British problem, but it's not just a British problem. It is a European problem. And if we'd asked the same question to all European countries, I think we would have the same answer across the board, including in France, when Mr. Chirac held a referendum in 2005. 55% of the people said no. So I think we need to revisit Europe. A crisis is always an opportunity to change and reform countries or institutions. And during a crisis, there are always people who are completely paralyzed by fear. And they're afraid of movement. Therefore, the difference between the 2008, 2010 and COVID-19 crisis is that with COVID-19, even though it's very serious, we know why things are not working. Because there's a virus, right? First of all, we have to understand why all of a sudden confidence disappeared. If you suppress COVID, not easy, but we're back on track. Back in 2008 or 2009, I wish we could have pressed a button to suppress something to put things back on track, but it wasn't that easy. One question slightly outside of Europe. Turkey. You were the first and only one who refused to even consider the integration of Turkey in Europe. History is showing you were right with the unbelievable increase of tension between Europe and Turkey, and more specifically, Turkey and France. What's your take on this crisis and on the situation with Turkey? Well, when I went to Ankara, yeah, right, you said this in your book. I said I would never accept Turkey in the EU. Never, ever. I was back then accused of being Islamophobic, Turkophobic. Mr. Chirac said you have to be stupid to not understand why it is important to have Turkey in Europe. I took it a little personally, and I did understand it was not a compliment, but I thought that there were more fools, which in a sense was a consolation. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Chirac, François Hollande and the Socialist Party were absolutely convinced that Erdogan should have a seat around the European table. Some people say, well, right, but if Turkey were part of Europe, they would behave differently. Yeah, right. Look at what they've done with NATO. They're part of NATO, and therefore there is no more NATO. Turkey has no business being in Europe because it's not a European country. And to my knowledge, the borders of Europe are not in Iraq and Syria. However, I think we need to have talks with Turkey. My suggestion is to create a completely new European body with 3 founding members: Europe, Russia, and Turkey, above Europe. And in the future, we could probably attach other countries like the Ukraine, Georgia, or even Belarus. I see 2 important topics that need to be addressed: economic questions and safety-related questions. And that is how the problem should be addressed, I believe. For the rest, Mr. Erdogan is getting upset. I can understand why. Back in 1994, he's the former mayor of Istanbul. He lost Istanbul. I guess his party lost Istanbul. So he got upset and is now taking advantage of COVID-19 to played a more important role in the Mediterranean region. Some say that the gas potential is bigger than in that region is bigger than the one in Norway. I approve Mr. Macron's policy. Mr. Macron decided to disagree with to oppose Turkey, and he asked Turkey to stick to international rules and regulations. Do you approve the fact that troops were sent to the region? I approve a firm position with respect to Mr. Erdogan. I created the Union for the Mediterranean. My successor found a way to destroy it. I'm not talking about Mr. Macron. I'm talking about the other one. I think I understood, says François Langlais. When you turn your back to the Mediterranean, it's like turning your back to the past. But I think we also turn our back to the future. And again, we ought to have the Union for the Mediterranean, to have a Pacific dialogue, including different topics like Turkey and Greece. It's not a new topic, but it's essential. But there again, we need to be creative. Turkey doesn't have a seat, doesn't have a place, doesn't have its place in Europe. Therefore, let's create this new organization above Europe, which would be a body where we can sit and talk and hopefully resolve conflicts. Okay, let's travel a little further to a country that you like, that you cherish, the U.S. They have upcoming elections. What is your prognosis? What are your personal wishes? This democracy is being agitated by turbulent forces. Well, I think that the Atlantic axis is absolutely essential for us. Let me say that first. Since the independence of the United States of America, they and we have lived the same cultures and have similar civilizations, and putting an end to the Atlantic axis would be a problem. We managed to go from the 20th century to the 21st century successfully because we had the Atlantic axis. My fear is that if we don't have this axis, the future wouldn't look very good, wouldn't look very bright. So this is very important, preserving the Atlantic axis. We need to, the second thing I would like to say is, we need to, you love a country for what it is, not for who leads it. I've seen the period of Barack Obama, where Barack Obama was walking on water, and where people said you have to love America because it is Barack Obama. I remember George W. Bush, who was hated by the world. Everybody was supposed to hate America because it was Bush. That has no sense. The U.S. has 400 million inhabitants. It's a culture, the American culture. We share the same history to a large extent. And this has nothing to do with whether we like the president of the United States or not. This is a detail. Mr. Trump is not the cause of America's decadence. He is the symptom of America's decadence. He is not the one who created the decadence of America, but he is simply showing that this decadence is there. Nobody else could wish to have someone like Trump managing their country, right? So what is going to happen? Well, what will happen is what Americans decide. They will decide for themselves. I have to tell you that Bolsonaro, Trump, Johnson are not people I would have liked to do business with. I can say that. That's the truth. But I don't decide. It's not up to me to decide. You don't decide, as a matter of fact. I think what we need is Atlantic solidarity, mutual support. That's the book. Trump is just a newspaper. See the difference? We have history on one side. The other side, we have the breaking news or latest news. You've always been very indulgent with me, and your indulgence has always touched me, Mr. Langlais. Mr. President, let's stay in the U.S. And a bit closer to the Pacific. With COVID-19, there's been increased tensions between China and the U.S. It's not 3 months old, it's more than 3 months old. And the election of Donald Trump has accelerated tensions. Some call it the new Cold War. What's the role of Europe in this new Cold War? And more specifically, what's the role of France in this new Cold War? Some people say we have to align with the U.S. position, but there is a risk of increased distance with China. Others are saying maybe we should align with China because of Donald Trump's position with respect to the transatlantic treaty. Well, let me say this. The first military power, the first economic power, the first monetary power in the world is the U.S. Since 3 terms now, they have repeatedly refused to exert their international duties. Barack Obama, my friend, was much more friendly and more open than Mr. Trump. But there is a but. America has, I think that the withdrawal, the gradual withdrawal of America started with Mr. Obama. Look at facts. Take Mr. Bush. Bush thought that American values could apply everywhere. He thought this way too much. Barack Obama had one single objective. He wanted to be loved by the world and bring Americans back home by doing so. Trump is Trump. Let's not be cruel.
Donc la place de leadership mondial est pour la première fois depuis bien longtemps.
For the first time, the leading spot is available. And as it is available, we're seeing the rise of China. For the very first time in the history of China, China has never been more comfortable with its will to politically conquer the rest of the world. They're absolutely comfortable with this notion of conquering the world. When they created the wall, the Great Wall of China, it was to protect themselves from barbarians, including ourselves, who were coming from the outside world. They call themselves l'Empire du Milieu.
L'Empire du Milieu. Mais jusqu'à présent, leur unique obsession, c'était
their only obsession
et donc récupérer Taïwan, Hong Kong, Macao,
was to
voire le Tibet.
recuperate Macau, Taiwan, possibly Tibet.
Un seul dirigeant chinois,
But never, ever has a Chinese leader publicly said we're going to build the Silk Road. Let me just remind you that the Silk Road stops in Scotland on the western end. This is the most fantastic, expansionist, decomplexed project we've ever seen in the history of China. The Chinese very smartly understood that America was giving up the first seat, the seat of leadership, and they're saying, well, it's available, let us take it. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We can't tell them wrong. Would we not have done the same thing with the driving seat being empty? Barack Obama was coming from the Pacific side. And, you know, there are positive sides to this story. I think we should encourage China to become a global partner and play its role to reduce GHG emissions, reduce regional conflicts, to contribute to monetary stability. Remember when Clinton asked to include yuan amongst the most important world currencies? And there are a lot of positive aspects. The problem is there is a lack of counterparties. India hasn't reached the right level of economic development, and that's where Europe has a key role to play. Strategically, Europe should play its role. But in order for Europe to play its role indeed, our European democracies have to stop considering that leadership, by definition, is illegitimate. There is nothing you can do without a powerful leader. Everybody talks about horizontality. I only believe in verticality. I know that it doesn't sound very fashionable or trendy to say so. Well, that's the way it is. Europe has a key role to play, but Europe needs a leader, Europe needs a strategy, and Europe needs a policy. When it was decided to convince Putin to move out of Georgia, it happened because of Europe, because Europe took the initiative, and France did. Well, I was chairing Europe, and I decided to do without the rules, because European rules are designed for you to do nothing, all right? And I guess that has worked out quite well, because little is happening. You know, when you see how much time it requires to get everyone's opinion, the country you need to save has been invaded twice, if not more, and it just doesn't work. So once again, I'm pleading in favor of Franco-German leadership and European leadership. But again, Europe has yet to understand that democracy is not... Europe needs to be given the tools and freedom. You're in real estate, right? You're real estate professionals. It's exactly the same thing for you. I think the current situation is representing huge opportunities. Let us come back to France. In France, we are seeing an unprecedented economic crisis. How do you see the coming months in France from an economic standpoint? Tough question. I think it very much depends on what area or what industries we're talking about. I think that the crisis in tourism and travel is going to last longer than expected. I think that in the impact on airlines and the aerospace industry is going to last longer than expected. My worries and my concern is how are we going to put an end to the decadence of the Western world? Well, I think we need great projects. We need love for great projects. Our country has to innovate. Our country has to build infrastructures. I wanted the Greater Paris, but we need more than the Greater Paris. We need the Greater Lyon. We need the Greater Marseille to make it the cultural capital of the Mediterranean. We should have a TGV going from Le Havre to Paris, because Le Havre is part of the Greater Paris, because Le Havre is the port of Paris. We should have a canal going from the Seine Nord Canal. This would be a great way for the Picardy region and the northern region to be connected. We should have high-speed train lines all the way to Brest, not just Rennes. We should have the Lyon-Torino high-speed train line. So that's how you... what we need to put an end to the crisis is initiatives. That's how you put an end to French depression. We need larger projects, greater than ourselves. France is designed for great projects, and France cannot accept small projects. We need large projects, ambitious projects, and that is how you wake up people. That is how you wake up the economy. The president is not responsible for unemployment, for jobs, or how well companies do. The president is responsible for boosting people's morale, the morale of the nation, and the morale goes up when we have large projects. When we had the crisis, I decided to go for the loan, the big loan. Right? And some people told me, you're crazy. The amount of debt is absolutely irrelevant. What is really important is what purpose does the debt serve? What happened is, look back over the past 10 years. Money has a negative value these days. You can no longer have the same economic strategy when money has a negative value as opposed to when money has positive value. We used to borrow money for 70%. This is what my mother paid to her bank when she bought her first apartment. Okay, 70% credit. What is important is not the debt. It's how you use the debt. If you can use your debt to pay for infrastructure that will bring growth for the future, that will generate income to pay back, then it's okay. Then it is perfectly okay. If you use the debt to keep people quiet, to tame social unrest, if you just use it to give people more purchasing power, well, then eventually you're going to hit a brick wall. So my message is take initiatives, invest in museums, invest in large events, invest in infrastructure, invest in architectural programs and projects that will make the French proud of their country. That's what I think the future should hold for us. And that is how you can address the existential crisis the French are going through. Not only the French, but Europeans and the Western world, more generally speaking. I think we need to mobilize energy. So some people say there is no money. That is not true. That's a mistake. I think projects generate money. It's not money that generates projects.
And I'm perfectly prepared to explain that in more detail, because if you wait until you have money to conduct large projects, you'll never do them. Louis XIV, when he built Versailles, was accused of ruining France. Do you think it's been amortized now? Do you think it's paid itself back? I would say so.
Un dernier mot, Monsieur le Président.
Word of conclusion, Mr. President. Something you are deeply committed to. The Septembre Nord campaign. Yes, thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'm a passionate man, although I've withdrawn from politics. Politics was part of my life. It no longer is. But I was deeply moved by someone I met, Noé Lemos, a kid. I met him when he was 8 and who died 3.5 years later from a terrible form of cancer. Noé, unfortunately, had a brain tumor. Let me tell you something. Kids who have that type of tumor, their chances of survival, 0. 100% of the kids die. I supported Noé and his wonderful family throughout this ordeal, and I thought that I did not have any other choice but to participate in the struggle against cancer in children. Of course, cancer in adults is a dreadful thing, but cancer in kids is a very different thing. It's even more unfair. You can't say that it's behavioral for them at all. And in Villejuif Hospital, where these wonderful teams are struggling to save these kids, I found it very difficult to go there because I was afraid. I thought I was going to look death in the face, but what I saw was life. People who had given up everything to save their kids. I saw young kids who'd already been operated on 15 times. And I decided to work with Frédéric Lemos to raise funds, because every year, 2,500 children, you're there, you're with your kid, your son, your daughter, you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, your child has cancer. And it takes money to push back the disease, which is why I decided to make a commitment in the struggle against pediatric cancer, and everything one can do, give money. We have a project with Frédéric Lemos that's fantastic. We've collected funds already, but we want to build a building in Villejuif Hospital purely dedicated to saving these kids. So I know it's not a very happy thing I'm talking about, but let me tell you something that I felt very deeply. If you give funds in research in pediatric cancer, you'll do a good deed, but you'll also make your own self feel good. Because when you defend a noble cause, it does good to yourself. It feels good. You're not alone. You call for solidarity. And look at these poor kids, these poor families. It can happen to any one of us. Of course, I don't wish it. I wouldn't wish it to anyone. But to them, to these families, it feels really good to know that there is support. So through that, we flew over a team from the US. We're moving forward. And it's something I feel very enthusiastic. It's my only charitable commitment, because I want to dedicate as much of my energy as I can. What I'm interested in today, I've been a very lucky person in life, and I need to help people who need that.
Merci.
It's a duty, and
Merci
these
à vous,
kids
Monsieur le
need
Président.
help. Thank you, Mr. Longley. Thank you, Mr. President.
Voilà, je voudrais remercier le président Nicolas Sarkozy,
Well, I would like to
venu sur le
thank
devant de la
President
scène,
Nicolas
en compagnie de François
Sarkozy
Langlais, pour
and
cette
journalist François
intervention.
Langlais for this
Vous
presentation.
parliez, Monsieur le Président, à l'instant
Mr. President,
de
you were
la
talking
fondation Gustave Roussy
about
et
the
Septembre
Gustave
Nord que
Roussy
vous promouvez, que vous soutenez.
Foundation
Il y a
and
un
Septembre
stand
Nord.
ici, et vous pourrez tout à
There
l'heure
is a
venir
booth
à la rencontre
outside
des
this
personnes
room,
qui
and you
sont
can go and
engagées
meet the people
à
who
vos
work
côtés.
for this
Le
charity.
livre de Nicolas Sarkozy,
Nicolas
est ici,
Sarkozy's book
que Monsieur
is
le Président
here,
va vous dédicacer.
and the President will be
Le temps
signing
des
it
tempêtes,
outside.
déjà best-seller,
Le
beaucoup
temps
de
des
choses
tempêtes,
intéressantes,
already a
la vision,
bestseller.
vous parliez
A lot of
partager
interesting
une
things,
ambition, redonner de la
vision,
fierté aux
shared
Français.
ambition,
Et puis on se
national
projette au
pride,
plan géopolitique
and
international. Merci
geopolitics.
infiniment d'avoir été
Thank
avec
you
nous.
very much,
C'était
Mr.
un honneur.
President. It was a
Merci à
great
vous.
honor for
Merci
us. Thank
François.
you. Thank you,
Merci
François.
infiniment.